Hello. Today we will be talking about Orientalism and the two paintings. Here, they're going to be presented right here and here. In my observations of this drawing, you see two main depictions of people. One is the white man, which is Christopher Columbus, and the other is the indigenous woman. And in this painting, drawing, you end up seeing that Christopher Columbus likes to depict himself as something so much higher and above because he's walking up to this woman and he has his flag and then he has his compass and he's all fully clothed and wears the clothes of someone who is wealthy, or at least someone who has a much higher status. And during these times, it was known that, indigenous people who obviously didn't have the same idea of clothes as the conquistadores did were seen as something sinful, something disgusting, just for the simple act of not wearing clothes when it's normalized in their society. Columbus looks down at this woman, and this woman looks to be afraid, and more so reaching out to him, and I'm not sure if the intention was to seem that she was someone who is weak and vulnerable, because her body was depicted as something more soft than something more sharp in a way that Christopher Columbus and his face shape, you see that his jawline is that way, while hers is completely soft. And also her body, and comparing her hands to Christopher Columbus, her hands are much softer than his are. His, to me, seem to be more detailed, and he's more outlined, has more shading compared than she does. Like, the only part of her shading is her arms and her leg. And compared to Columbus, he has very great shading upon the backside of his coat and then his arm. Then, as well in the background, you end up seeing that there's a few other indigenous people around the fire and cooking a leg too. And this painting is honestly showing the fact how the conquistadores viewed them as something as wild, savage, eating humans, something so despicable to them, when in reality it probably wasn't what they were actually doing at all, and just wanted to frame these people as something violent and something that needs to be conquered, something that needs to be changed, or showing an excuse that, hey, these people are bad, and we have these depictions of them eating people, killing them, hunting them, just like how an animal would, and that is to justify them hurting these people and having, I guess the word that I'd use would be genocide, because they did murder a lot of indigenous people. And another way that they as well used the depictions of this is that with the indigenous woman looking soft, something that is unworked, something to be moldable as, while Christopher Columbus, even though he is wearing clothes and you can't fully see the outline, he seems to be more defined than she is. And maybe they could have used the possible excuse that there's these people who look lazy, who are too fed and need something to be put on to work. And that is probably this is my observation about this specific painting. And we will be moving on to the next now. And the next one that we shall be viewing is the casta painting. You see all these different people, and in this painting, to me, it shows that they were afraid of not knowing what each type of different mixes or different races that they could end up being with different types of people. And they needed to categorize each of these people, just like the Linnean system. And they probably, well, at least in my idea of it, is that they were probably afraid of not knowing what would be superior to them or in their level of equality of being white or being something below them, which is a very stupid idea of telling people that if they end up having a child with a white person and that person ends up being mixed, and then that kid having another kid with another, well, not another kid, but another person who's white, and then continuing that lineage, and then eventually going in a full circle of it just being white at the end. It is a very foolish idea of telling them that this is practically out of their reach to even become white or or even anything about it, because at the end they can't really change who they are or their lineage of who was a part of their family, which was someone who was indigenous or brown, African, anything. Okay, I'll be passing it back to Roger/Jared to talk about Orientalism and hegemony, because that is something that I feel will be relating to this topic as well. Okay, passing it along. Well, thank you, Katakuri, for passing it along to me. Today I will be talking about both hegemony and Orientalism. I'll start with hegemony, and I'll be referencing a book from my primary source reader that I've been reading in my other class that I thought would be fitting for this. And for this topic, I'm going to be talking about Sor Juana for hegemony as an example. Hegemony is kind of like ruling with softness, or not necessarily softness, but not an aggressive manner as how conquistadores were like, just do this, or, or get awfully aggressive. Well, hegemony was kind of ruling with a low fist, or in a sort of more manipulative manner, at least. Because, for an example, for Sor Juana, she was a woman who converted to become a nun. And with that, she still did a lot of the things that made her her. Like, she continued to do science. She continued to read. And she'd read a whole bunch of other things. She'd invent things. And she was someone who was incredibly smart and talented. And with this, when she started pushing the boundaries of the government with the things that she published, the religious higher-ups, like the priests, the padres and everything, weren't liking that, because obviously they didn't like someone lower than them to be doing stuff like this. And they did it by telling her that because they have the religious authority, they decided to tell her that you need to stop doing this, because she couldn't think of anything else but to not disobey them. She couldn't disobey them. It was unthinkable for her. And so she had to completely stop everything that she loved. So she thought of herself as this like foul woman after these events that had happened, and it broke her down eventually. And that is what hegemony is. It breaks the person down eventually, just like they did with the indigenous people, in reference that they were breaking these people down slowly but surely, especially as they try to convert them into the churches or getting them to work, and then that just breaking down their spirit of not wanting to really disobey them anymore, because they knew what their punishments were going to be. And now continuing on. Okay, I may not be very good at explaining what Orientalism is, but it sort of has a connection to the Orient in a way. I'm still learning about this and still trying to find like my full grasp of understanding about this, but Orientalism is a way of like something that is underlying in society in a manner. It's usually something like kind of like you end up like, it's something more like underlying, kind of like it's racism. At least to me, it's how I see it, with how they view other things like religious, nationality, or character of someone who's different. Like, Orientalism isn't there, but it's there in a sense of, you can't obviously see it with your own two eyes spelled out, but it's something being more underlying and something to call other things inferior, or yeah. I'm still learning about that in complete honesty and trying to like fully comprehend it, but I do have an idea of what Orientalism is. But this is now the end of my podcast. Goodbye. Bye.